Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial #law, that is #529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. And warm up on the low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such great work over at Bustin Brackets. We're going to be chatting with him about just how crazy these tournaments were the last few weeks. I mean, there was upset upon upset. There was board breakdown upon board breakdown. And then we're going to be chatting with him about what we can expect out of some of these teams and who he's feeling bullish/bearish on. Take a look at a few games for Sunday. So a little bit of this and that. We're going to have a good time with him. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @Unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, size per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but I had a fun day of college basketball on Saturday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Some late night upsets as Oregon is able to get the job done against Alabama. This by kind of 83-81. And for Oregon, they won the turnover battle 8-1 in the first half. Overall 15-8 as Alabama does go 12 of 38 from 3-point range, but Mark Sears is just 1 of 11 from distance. So the rest of the team went 11 of 27 from 3-point range, and for Sears just 11 points in this one, but did have Aiden Hallway come off the bench for 11, but Keyshawn Bartholomew, he was the main man for Oregon in this one, 22 big points. Oregon loses a rebound battle by a count of 44-39, but lack of 3-point shooting, along with them being able to do a rock-solid job in the turnover battle, that allows Oregon to be able to find a way to get the job done. And then you saw Cal Poly go on the road. They take down Stanford by a count of 97-90. For Cal Poly, they go 12 of 30 from 3-point range, just 10 of 33 for Stanford, as Stanford was able to have a pair of guys, Chisom Okpara, along with Benny Gieler, coming off the bench. They combined for 30 points, but for Cal Poly, they really sped this game up. They do lose the turnover battle 14-9, but they win the rebound battle 36-32, and for Cal Poly, they were able to get 30 big points out of Owen Kuntz, so they get a very nice upset. Nothing more upsetting than if you're a Seton Hall fan, though, as for them, they lose at home to winless Monmouth by a count of 63-51. For Seton Hall, they go 5 of 21 from 3. Monmouth, 10 of 21 from 3-point range. Abdi Bashir Jr., 28 points in this one, and for Monmouth, they did commit 14 turnovers to Seton Hall 10, but they win that rebound battle 34-28, so they're able to get a nice win, and we saw a lot of mayhem in the early AM, with Southern being able to get a win over Louisiana Tech, this by a count of 73-70, as Southern, a 15.5-point underdog, wins outright on the money line, and it was because they were headlined by a Manning, Joe Manning, no relation to Peyton. He was able to give you 21 points, and also got 21 points out of Jordan Johnson, and for Louisiana Tech, they go 9 of 26 from 3-point range off the bench. You were able to get 5 made threes out of Al Green, so he did a nice job there, but they lose the turnover battle 17-14, and despite having the Bacho man, Daniel Bacho, out there, he had 6 blocks, but they lose the rebound battle 34-30 as well. You saw Wisconsin win but not cover against old Chicago State 74-53. No reason for alarm on the Badgers, though. They go 10 of 30 from 3-point range. They still dispatch of Chicago State very easily, but good news for Chicago State. They're 0-9 straight up, but now they've got to cover against the spread. So yay verily there, and yay verily for Creighton. They were able to get an 80-76 win over Notre Dame in a game where both of these teams shot it very well from 3. Creighton 11 of 24 from 3, 9 of 23 for Notre Dame. Notre Dame dealing with Marcus Burton being out. Creighton currently dealing with Steve Ashworth being banged up. I thought that he was supposed to be out for quite a while. Returns in this game, and he was able to supply the team with 15 points. So he looked relatively good in his 36 minutes. So that's good for Creighton. And for this Notre Dame bunch, they win the turnover battle by a count of 12-9. They actually win the rebound battle as well as Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's been a little bit up and down, and he did not play in this one. So you had Steve Ashworth in, you had Ryan Kalkbrenner out, and you had a win for Creighton. So go figure there. And in terms of other results, you saw Marquette be able to get a win, but in a lot of places they were laying right around about 32.5, 33. They don't quite cover that. 94-62, so you need about one or two more points to be able to cover. But that said, still a nice easy win. They go 14 of 40 from three-point range with Cam Jones putting up a double-double, 20 points, 10 assists. They do a nice job winning that rebound battle, 21-13. They win the rebound battle as well, so nice thorough domination out there. We also saw a nice thorough domination of this team as well, as it was Purdue-Fort Wayne going on the road getting the job done against East Texas A&M. That by a count of 77-57. They're looking pretty rock solid this season. And you saw Indiana State have all that they could handle with Iona, 83-80 the final. This is a very much new look Indiana State team. They were laying 3.5 and they don't quite get there. They go 11 of 27 from three-point range. So a little bit of a good sign there. And this is a good sign if you're a fan of Texas A&M, 81-77. They're able to slip past Rutgers, as got very hairy late. As for Rutgers, they trail in the first half, they lead by 9 in the second half, but then they hit the skids. This was a game that was 77-76 with 3:10 remaining. Texas A&M, they get the final 5 points with Wade Taylor IV gearing them to victory. He was able to get them 24 points, and for Rutgers, there's two-star freshman. Did step up big in this one. Ace Bailey was the main star in this one, 24 points, 10 rebounds. Dylan Harper, he throws in their 18, but outside of that, you didn't have a lot of support outside of the 20 points that you had out of Jeremiah Williams. So Texas A&M able to get a nice win, and Georgetown gets to 100. They take down Albany by a count of 168. It had been a little bit of a slog for Georgetown on offense to start the year, but they go 41 of 65 from the floor. Thomas Sorber continues to be very good with 14 points, 13 rebounds, so do have to love what you saw there. And that was the opposite of this game, where Lafayette was leading Niagara 21-18 at the half, and Lafayette, they get the win 59-47 on a night where Niagara shot 3 of 26 from three-point range. Lafayette a smoldering 7-27 from three-point range, but for Niagara, even though they win the rebound battle, they lose that turnover battle by a count of 9-4. So that was a bit of an issue for them. No issues for Utah, though, in terms of the straight-up win. They do not cover the pretty large number against Eastern Washington, but 88-80, they find a way to get it done as they go 28-45 at the free throw line. And for Utah, they win the rebound battle 40-33, 11-8. They're able to win the turnover battle as well. So nice showing there, and a nice showing from Kansas. 86-51 the final over Furman, as Furman goes 9 of 38 from three-point range. For Kansas, they went just 4 of 17 themselves, but KJ Adams had himself a nice night. He was able to go off for 22 points. For Kansas, they win the turnover battle 11-7 as well. So nice CZW there for Drake. You feared that they might get a little bit overvalued coming off of that big victory in Charleston. They were between about a 14 to a 14.5 point favorite. A lot of places had 14.5, not quite a cover there, but still a quality win, 61-47. So they look solid there, and UConn is back to bludgeoning lesser competition. 99-45, they take down Maryland Eastern Shore. This was a line that got up to 40.5, and for Maryland Eastern Shore, they've now taken 3 straight losses of 40-plus points. So after what was a pretty nice start to the season, it now went straight down the toilet bowl. And you did have Liam McNeely be able to supply the team with 16 points. Also had Jalen Stewart be able to supply 16 points in this one, as you had no Alex Caravan in this one, but no problem for UConn. Unlike Houston, we do have a problem because they're right now 4-3. Not something I expected to see. San Diego State 73-70 winners. LJ Cryer is able to go 5 of 13 from 3, 21 points, and Amanda Sharp 23 big points. But Houston loses a turnover battle 12-7. They do win that rebound battle by a count of 40-38. But for San Diego State, you're able to have the Bird be able to give you the Bird. Miles Bird 3rd. He was able to supply the team with 18 points. They go 9 of 25 from three-point range, and they find a way to get the job done. In my video pick-miss pick, I picked Toledo, and I will say, for anyone that follows along with the video pick-miss picks, along with the written articles, I apologize about the fact that I've been absolutely terrible the last 2 weeks. This has been crazy. I have not been at my best, and I am doing everything humanly possible to get better because I am as angry as you are. As a matter of fact, I'm more angry than you are, so we will try to get that online, but that's it for Oakland, a team that had not scored more than 64 points against a D1 team prior to this, 11 of 22 from three-point range in Toledo. After 4 straight performances of 80-plus points, they put up a 52 spot. Georgia, they put up a 102 spot, 102 to 56. They completely dispatch of Jacksonville as they go 14 of 24 from three-point range. Yet I believe 6 different guys be able to score in double figures with Justin Absent being able to put in their 9 as well. So that was nice throw domination. And then if you, like me, laid the points with Portland State, they literally got up 7-0. This was a line of 6.5. They had covered until about the 245 mark, and then they win by a count of 71 to 68. So sometimes those are just how things go, but what is going well for UC Irvine, their rock-solid defense. They bludgeon another team 67 to 60. They take down Towson. Not enough to be able to cover the 9 to 9.5, and UC Irvine did lose the turnover battle by a count of 20 to 8, but for Towson, they lose a rebound battle by a count of 36 to 24 as you had for this UC Irvine bunch 25 big points out of Devin Tillis, and then you saw Oregon State completely take it to UC Davis. This by a count of 90 to 57 as for UC Davis, they actually go 9 of 21 from three-point range in this one, but Oregon State 8 of 14 from three-point range. Oregon State as well, 24 of 25 at the free throw line. They do lose the turnover battle 14 to 10, but they won the battle on the boards 40 to 17. For UC Davis, they did not have a single player register more than 3 rebounds in this one, and Michael Rataj by himself had 11 rebounds. That's the same amount of defensive rebounds as UC Davis had in this game, and if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball, well, I'll tell you right now, it's been absolutely crazy what we've gotten thus far this season, as we barely have the overs in the lead on unders. 611 overs, 606 unders. Favorites for the season, hitting at just 47.4%, 576, 639, and 18 against the spread. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, dogs have been barking 187, 162, and 6 against the spread in the last 7 days, 180 unders, 172 overs, and a few pushes. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's take a look at the Sunday games, what to make out of the results that we've seen from these tournaments the last 2 weeks, and so much more with Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets. He joins me next right here on Coach Kitchen. Myself, Peggy Peterson, now a part of the Bustin Family Podcast. We're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for discussing with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Bustin Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man as we've got Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such great work over at Bustin Brackets. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he has been hard at work taking a look on so many different fronts, whether that be out there in his local Pittsburgh area, looking at the national front, mid-majors, majors, ACC, you name it, he does it. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at OopsOn351 all together. And Tristan, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg.
Always great to have you aboard. And Tristan, it has been a really interesting year in college basketball thus far. And just what have you made out of the last 2 weeks or so of these non-conference tournaments? Because year in and year out, we always find a lot of craziness, a lot of unexpected results with these non-conference tournaments. And that was certainly the case this year with UConn finishing, 8 out of 8 teams at the Maui Invitational.
Yeah, I mean, just about all of the marquee MTEs outside of maybe the Rady Children's Invitational has surprising result. As you mentioned, I mean, Maui just almost every game with those teams was either compelling or an upset. I mean, Dayton was a few bounces away from being 3-0, and yet, they luckily was able to beat UConn to get the 7th place game, but they looked good. Michigan State looked good. And then you're going to look on the other side, the battle for Atlantis. Gonzaga gets a shocking upset loss to West Virginia, but maybe the Mountaineers are better than we thought. And then meanwhile, Indiana loses 2 games, but luckily for them, there was a program even more worse than them in Providence. So, there's a lot of results I think we're going to come back to haunt some of these teams. I mean, Miami going 0-3 and then following that up, losing the Charleston Southern. I think we're starting to see teams that are clearly just not very good. And then there are some that are definitely in the surprise range for now.
Yep, there certainly have been a lot of surprises in college basketball thus far, and even that Dayton team that was able to take down UConn. I like what I'm seeing out of them. They very nearly pulled off that win against North Carolina. Who knows if Nate Santos' shoe size is a little bit different as to what happens on that front. But in terms of some big surprises in all of college basketball, I know that we were talking about a lot of this team before the season, but even for my expectations, and I thought Auburn was going to be good, I feel like they have really separated themselves from most of these other teams, sounds like your Kansases of the world, as one of the best and most complete teams in all of college basketball. And while we can look at the bad and everything that we saw from UConn at the Maui Invitational, I think that they just really put on a show.
Yeah, I mean, they're the same physical, aggressive team that they were in the past couple of years. And Janai Broome might be the front runner for National Player of the Year so far. He's just been completely dominant. But the guard play has been good for them. And in the past couple of years, the guard play has at times been really bad in games, which is why they lose them. They don't need these guys to be elite. They just need them to be good enough. And Miles Kelly, the Georgia Tech transfer, to High Pettiford, to five-star freshman, they've just been really good. Cheney Johnson, the former D2 star, who's played a good role for them. I mean, they have plenty of depth. They have guys that can score, and they're just defensively potent. They have a really good case of being the best team in the country. Are they unbeatable? No, but right now in the loaded SEC, they sort of have themselves in a tier on their own for now.
Yeah, it's been incredible what we've been able to see out of them. And I mean, Gianni Broome, am I too bullish on him to say that he might be up for Player of the Year right now? Because I feel like he's been that good for this Auburn team.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had great performances against Houston. He was great in all three games in Maui. I mean, we don't have a Zach Edey who's just going to go off for 30 and 15 every game. So it's going to be a little more open. There's plenty of guys that can get in the mix. But right now, you're the best player on the best team. Obviously, Kansas is going to have something to say about that. Hunter Dickinson's been good, but not on the level of a Broome. So I think right now you have to give him the early edge.
Absolutely. It's been fun what we've been seeing out of all those teams. As joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Bustin Brackets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. That certainly was a standout. And then I will throw out there this team as well, because we saw the battle for Atlantis. We saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. You were alluding to Indiana, but what do we make out of a West Virginia team that I wasn't expecting too much out of them coming into this year? They played 2 overtime games. They get the job done against Arizona to wrap things up. And that's a team that is really surprising me, because I thought in year number 1 under Darren DeVries, it was going to take a little bit of time. But despite the fact that West Virginia doesn't have a lot of depth, and you know all about this team with covering the backyard brawl every single year, and you saw Pittsburgh take it to them. But sans that game, West Virginia, night in and night out, has been able to deliver some very nice performances.
Yeah, I think it's taken them a minute to sort of figure out everyone's role. And I think, Javon Small, the transfer from OK State, being the guy instead of Tucker DeVries has worked out. And it's allowed DeVries to sort of get better acclimated in a high major scenario, because he struggled early on. He was bad against Pittsburgh, but he's been really good in the battle for Atlantis. And if nothing else, they just showed that they belonged. I mean, as you mentioned, the 2 overtime games, they could have won all of them. That's something that if you're a West Virginia fan, you have to feel very happy about, because the Big 12 doesn't really have any bad teams. I mean, right now, you could argue that TCU is the worst, but a Jamie Dixon team is always going to be respected. So it's just going to make the Big 12 just a complete round robin of great games, and someone's going to have to finish at the bottom. But if you're a Mountaineer fan, you at least can spend the next month believing that you have a shot.
Yep, absolutely. As joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman. He's doing absolutely amazing work over at Bustin Brackets, and is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that we've got just a lot of intrigue in general that's going on in college basketball. We were alluding to it with these non-conference tournaments and all that is happening with them. But that said, in terms of what you've all been noticing over the last few weeks, has there been anything that's really been standing out to you in terms of not just these conference tournaments, but just in terms of some of these teams that have come out with some lackadaisical efforts, / some of these teams that they've been a little bit fired up? Because I just noticed this year in and year out, it feels like in these non-conference tournaments, it's just a case where some of these teams, they treat it as a business trip. A lot of these teams that are the teams that are sort of counted out are the ones that do so. And we see some of these teams, just for lack of a better term, not take it as seriously as they should. And you see a lot of these teams sort of get picked off, like we might have seen with Indiana the first few days of that battle for Atlantis.
Yeah, I mean, and we're entering December. That's sort of a very sleepy time for a lot of teams, because you have finals, you have holiday break, and you have a lot of bye games that don't really matter, but they can, sneak up on teams. And we saw it just in the ACC alone, Boston College wins the Cayman Islands Classic. I personally didn't give them a lot of a shot, but they beat Boise State. That was a big win for them. And then they followed it up by losing at home to Dartmouth and giving up 17 3-pointers. And then Miami, who was supposed to be fairly motivated after getting swept in the Charleston Classic, ends up losing to Charleston Southern on Saturday. And, Matthew Cleveland didn't play a lot. So I don't know if he's been benched or what the situation is there, but it's not looking good at Miami. And I think just overall, the ACC, a few teams have looked solid so far. Clemson, Pittsburgh, Louisville, though we'll have to see what happens with Kayshawn Pryor's MRI. But right now, I think that the bottom of the ACC, it has really struggled, and it could come back to haunt the conference.
Yep, it certainly could, and that's something that I'm going to be watching out for as well. And the entire Big East that you mentioned, it's been a little bit rough for them, but I do like what I've been seeing out of Marquette thus far this season. We saw them have a nice win on Saturday, and just with all these teams fumbling around, with Creighton now dealing with injuries, with UConn not looking so great, just how open do you think that it is? Really, in my opinion, outside of Marquette, who I feel like they become the head and shoulders top team with St. John's, dealing with Davian Smith not being out there in the fold, and we saw them struggle with Harvard on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's wide open, but not for a good reason, because I think the number of bids could end up being the same as last year, which was 3. I mean, it's great that DePaul is a nice story, but DePaul has had one of the worst schedules so far, so they really haven't been tested. But Seton Hall loses at home to a really bad Monmouth team who didn't win a game. You mentioned before St. John's, haven't been overly impressive. Losing to Georgia is fine, but you kind of do need to get those kinds of wins. And then teams like Villanova have been bad. Quietly enough, Butler has 3 power conference wins after winning their MTV, but they also lost to Austin Peay at home. So who knows about them? And then UConn currently has no resume after getting swept. We'll see what happens with Creighton once Kalkbrenner's healthy. We'll see with Pop Isaacs. They still have talent, but they've also struggled. So as much as the ACC has struggled, the Big East is pretty much right there with them in that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of intrigue that has been happening out there in that conference, so that's something that I'm very much taking note of. And then with regards to Sunday, we're not going to be seeing a whole bunch of top flight teams on display. We're going to be seeing Maryland going up against Alcorn State, and Alcorn State, it's been a little bit rough for them, but another team has stood out to me because we just talked about what we've been seeing in terms of these non-conference tournaments. West Virginia's risen up for me. It's Kansas State, and they should be able to take care of Arkansas Pine Bluff, but I say that with knowing that they were leading by just 2 points at the half against Mississippi Valley State, and I think that that's truly the mark of a bad team as of right now. But what have you seen out of this Kansas State team? One that I thought could be towards the middle of the Big 12, but I have my concerns with them after what we saw a week ago in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most expensive rosters in the country. I mean, Indiana sort of getting all the flack, but Kansas State 5-2, but they lose to Liberty, which they're not a bad team, but at the same time, you don't want to be losing to Liberty. Got blown out of home to LSU, the best team they played. We'll see how good LSU is, but they're a team that is real shaky, and we'll see them next week when they take on St. John's. That'll be a great matchup for both teams. But if I told you that Brandon Hawson and David Nagesson were the 2 best players, you probably wouldn't think that they're a good enough team, because Doug McDaniel, Coleman Hawkins, Ugonna Yenzo, you reportedly spent a pretty nice penny for these guys, and they're not coming through at the level you thought they were. And that's a big concern, especially Doug McDaniel, who's not even averaging double figures for them after having a bunch of 20-plus point games for Michigan when he was able to play. So they have time to get things together. I mean, Jerome Tang deserves the benefit of the doubt, but they don't look good. And again, in Big 12, where you can say no one truly looks bad after Colorado and West Virginia's impressive Feast Week performances, you're going to have to get things going, or else it could be you at the bottom.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what we get out of those teams moving forward, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get in general with regards to these next few weeks. As joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think that this causes a little bit of an interesting debate as well, because with Kansas State coming in, they've been a little bit rough for this Big 12, but overall the Big 12 with Colorado State, a team that I thought was going to be not so great this year, rising up with Utah, being able to look pretty solid as well. I think that there's a great debate between the Big 12 and the SEC and which conference is a little bit more sacked, because I really like what I've seen out of pretty much all of these SEC teams as well, with Auburn being able to rise up as well. How do you take a look at those two conferences? Because I just look at those two and I feel like they're very clearly head and shoulders above the rest of college basketball right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say with the Big 12, I think they're getting a little bit more credit for teams like Colorado and West Virginia and Arizona State and Cincinnati, who's a top 20 team, playing above expectations, but there's several teams that have been playing below expectations. TCU hasn't been good. Arizona's under 500, which is kind of insane to say a month in. They just have not looked good against decent teams. Baylor's had their struggles too. We mentioned Kansas State. I do think that there are a few more underwhelming teams in the Big 12 compared to the SEC, where, outside of South Carolina, the only underachieving team you could argue for right now is Arkansas, who's dealt with injuries. Everyone else has been pretty good, or as expected. In Oklahoma, the winners of the Battle for Atlantis, no one gave them a shot. They were a preseason bottom 3 team to begin with, and now they look pretty good. So I give the SEC the edge. I do think the Big 12 has several Final Four contenders still, but I think there's more Sweet 16 and above caliber teams in the SEC for now.
No doubt about it. And I do want to ask you about this as well, because we've now seen these tournament results. We've seen some teams look very good. We've seen some teams look very good. For a team that you cover in Pittsburgh, I think that you would agree with me, looking pretty rock solid after they got that win against Ohio State a few days ago. But who's a team that you look at and maybe they didn't have the best results over the past week or two, but you're just seeing something that you like and you feel like from where they are now until March that you have a chance to really be able to ascend and to just continue to improve, and you just are liking what you're seeing out of them?
Yeah, I think in the Big Ten, you look at Michigan State, who got a really gutty win without Jace Richardson against North Carolina. They're just a team, as long as Tom Izzo's around, they're going to play above expectations. They're going to be in the field. They've had some concerning games. I mean, they almost lost to Bowling Green, but they're starting to find their way. Frankie Fittler is getting more acclimated. Jaden Akins is playing better. Jeremy Fears is doing better than Xavier Booker, who almost was going to be out of rotation, had a huge starting performance against North Carolina in the second half to help them get the win. I just think that there's enough talent, and with the elite coaching by Izzo, Michigan State's going to fight for possibly a top 5 spot in the conference.
Yep, they're going to be a team very much worth watching for, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of intrigue in general to watching college basketball. And Tristan, you're doing an amazing job of being able to cover it all. You're doing great work over at Bustin Brackets. I know you've been helping out our good friends over at Sleepers Media and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me at Hoopsnut351 on Twitter/X and also at Bustin Brackets. And now we're getting ready to go to the conference challenges, ACC, SEC, and Big East, Big 12. So a lot of great matchups coming this upcoming week as well.
And we've also got Big Ten Conference play as well, which is always very random when you get these Big Ten Conference games that happen at this time of year. But we've got a little bit of everything that's going down right now. And Tristan, he does an amazing job of being able to cover it all. So big thanks to Tristan Freeman for joining me right here on Cuts Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. When I was asked by Uncommon Goods to do this read, I felt like, man, I am the perfect guy for this one, because with Uncommon Goods, they scour the globe for original, handmade, remarkable things. Somehow, some way, you know it's going to be perfect, and you're going to be supporting some of the little guys. And why I'm so perfect for it is, for those of you guys that watch everything that I do with my TikTok videos on the old Twitter/X, you'll notice I'm wearing all these low/mid-major college basketball jerseys, and Uncommon Goods, they're sort of of like that for all of your goods for this upcoming season. They find you a nice variety of products. They're high quality, they're unique, oftentimes handmade. You're supporting a lot of, shall we say, smaller artists as well, and you're able to just find a home for a lot of different various things that if you're trying to look online thinking, man, where can I find this very unique thing? Uncommon Goods, they're going to be able to find that for you, and you're able to get 15% off your next gift by going to uncommongoods.com/coast. That is uncommongoods.com/coast, COAST. That gives you 15% off. Do not miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be able to have Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such great work over at Bustin Brackets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we eat some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @Unit_D1. Going to be going in Las Vegas rotation, or this is where we go with the games out there in power conferences first. Well, not necessarily power conferences, more or less the not small conferences, and then the conferences that are listed here: the Patriot League, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Northeast Conference, the Atlantic Sun. Believe that I hit all of them except for the Southland. Those are going to be the games that are at the bottom. So how about if we do get things started with 681, 682 on the betting board? It is Buffalo. They're on the road against Penn State. Buffalo is a 28 to 28.5 point underdog. Totals between 161 and 161.5. Set Penn State as a 29-point favorite. I'm not willing to lay anything more than what we've got right now, but I'm actually willing to lay with Penn State. This team has just been absolutely tremendous on offense. This is a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, a top 15 team in terms of generating turnovers, and Buffalo has been loose with the ball this season as they're turning the ball over right around about 12.5 times per contest. Now, I do love what you're able to get out of Tyson Dunn, who's come over from the country of Canada. He's given the team 13.5 points, 6 boards, 7 assists. His 4.9 turnovers per game, right at the top of college basketball with that regard, so need a little bit more there. And for Penn State, they've actually been a relatively solid team on the glass. They're a top 100 team with regards to rebound rate after they were outside the top 300 last season with the Northern Illinois transfer in Yannick Niederhauser really being able to pick things up. 2 blocks, 7 boards, 12.5 points per game. And then you've got out there in the backcourt Ace Baldwin, who's now hitting about 38.5% of his threes. This is a Penn State team that shoots 37.5% from the outside. And for Buffalo, they are 4-3 this year, but it's not really been because of their defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this was a team that was well outside the top 275 last season. They are very much tracking for that this season. I do think that Penn State going to be able to generate turnovers. I do think that they win the battle down low. With Buffalo right now clocking in 248 turns of points allowed on a per possession basis. Do think that this is going to be an up and down game involving 2 up-tempo teams. Set my total 163. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 28.5 with Penn State. 683, 684 on the betting board. No numbers up on this game. It's Iona and Rice. We give our own to Lane Kiffin go Owls. This is from the Bahamas, and these two teams played yesterday, and that is a big reason why you don't have numbers up on this game. But with regards to this Rice versus Iona game, I did set Rice as a 3-point favorite, so want to lay up to 2.5 there, 3.5 for more, taking the points with Iona, and then set my total at 139, so 138.5 or less, and on the over, 139.5 or higher, the under. Both of these teams aren't really playing slowly, but both of these teams have been out of sorts in terms of offense. Both of these teams turn the ball over going into Saturday north of 13 times per contest. For Rice, they just really don't have a lot of shooting in general on their team, as they bring in Kellen Amos, who last season he was over at Central Connecticut, entered into yesterday with about 11 points per contest, but shooting just 23% from 3. As well, it's a team that shoots 34% per distance, but also 65% at the free throw line. Trey Borneau, he's been able to give you 14 points, 5.5 boards. He's been the main man, and Alan Husinovic, he's the main returner from a season ago. For Rice, he's been able to supply about 9 to 10 points per contest. Last year shot 40% from 3-point range, but not a lot of depth with this team. They bring in the Villanova transfer in Trey Patterson, who's only been able to give you about 3.5 points per game. To his credit, though, he gives you 5 rebounds per game. And for this Iona team, they've been able to get a little bit down low in Yafet Mundy. He's been able to give you a little bit over 7 boards per contest, about 8 points per game. But other than him, you don't have a ton down low. Clarence Rupert, he was a part of that Elite 8 team with St. Peter's, but he got injured in that game against West Virginia. He's not out there, or else they would have a little bit of a advantage down low. DeJure Reeves, he's become a nice bucket getter. He was able to put up 30 yesterday against Indiana State. He overall has been able to give you 16 plus points per contest. He's the main man that you look to for overall scoring in this game. And going into yesterday, Iona, 17 turnovers, shooting 28.5% from 3. Got it going a little bit more against Indiana State. I think that speaks a little bit more to Indiana State than this Iona team, because they had been held below 70 in 5 straight games before that, and that includes a game against Cornell, so a little bit less than tremendous there. You got a Rice team that just has not been able to get out of their own way offensively as well, but I do think that they control the boards down low. Do think that this is a sloppier game, but I also do think that these are two defenses that aren't necessarily firing all cylinders as well, so I did see my total in the high 30s, 138.5 or less, and on the over 139 or higher, the under, and then I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2.5 with Rice, 3.5 or more. Going to be willing to take those points with Iona as we go to another game that is off the board, 685, 686. This is Penn, and they are playing us Elon, part of the Penn multi-team event, and with this one, I said Elon is the 1.5 point favorite on the road. I'm willing to lay up to a point with them, /shake them as a money line underdog. 2 or more taking the points with Penn, and then 150 or higher will be my buy point on the under. 149 or less, I'm going to be in on the over. Have a Penn unit that I think is going to be able to do a pretty solid job in terms of being able to match up down low, but this Elon team, they've been able to give you a lot of three-point shooting. Overall for the season, they're shooting north of 36% from three-point. And Matthew Van Komen, he's standing 7'4". He's able to give you 3 blocks per contest. Sometimes just struggles with consistency in general, but he's a nice upside guy that can really develop as the season goes along. For Elon, you saw them be able to get the job done yesterday against Navy. They do have an issue turning the ball over, about 13 turnovers per game for them, but they kept things very clean yesterday with just 8 turnovers. Van Komen, I mentioned, he had 12 boards and 4 blocks in that game. And then you got TJ and TK Simpkins, a pair of guys for this Elon team that have both been dynamos with regards to their scoring. They're both giving you a combined about 33 points per contest. Neither of them have really shot it well from three-point range either. Nick Dorn has been your main guy, shooting about 40% from three-point range, giving you double figures. So really like what I'm seeing out of this Elon team. Now you do have some nice stretchability and versatility with this Penn team, and guy that stands about 6'8" or so, Nick Spinoso, who's been your top rebounder, just under 7 boards per contest, but throws in there about 11.5 points. He's able to give you 2.5 assists, so do like his point forward ability. But you got Sam Sherry, he's saying 6'11" for this Elon team. Not necessarily a dominator with regards to the boards, but now he's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. He's able to pop it from three-point range as well. And for Penn, right now Spinoza is the main guy that's filling out the ball. You do have Ethan Roberts, who's been able to supply the team with about 17 points per game, but without necessarily that main trigger man in the backcourt, because they do lose so many of those guys like Tyler Perkins and company from a season ago. They're in a bit of transition. Need a little bit more out of George Smith, who's only been able to give you about 5 points per game. Last season was not great from 3. 2 years ago, actually shot 46% from 3 points, so we've seen a little bit of regression there. And then Sam Brown, he's been stepping up in his sophomore season after he gave the team 43% 3-point shooting, 11 points per contest last year, but the overall efficiency has been down as well. So I do like Elon outright on the money line. If I'm able to get them as an underdog, we'll just take that money line. If you have 2+ here with Penn, I'll be willing to take them, and then 149 or less, and on the over 150 or higher, the under. 687, 688 on the betting board. UAB is going to be playing us in Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is an underdog of 7.5 points. 155 to 156 is that total, and with UAB, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points. So, going to be willing to take those points with Middle Tennessee for this UAB unit. It has been a very up and down season for them. They're so really good on the boards, with the XL Lendyborg being able to supply a double-double last season, and he's been able to do the same thus far this season. But for UAB, you just need a little bit more three-point shooting out of this unit. Last year, don't call his name, Alejandro Vasquez, being able to shoot north of 36% from 3. This year he's shooting 22% from the outside, and I do think that the UAB 30% three-point shooting is going to be going northward. They're turning the ball over 12 times per contest with their tempo. That's not too bad. They bring in a guy in Jabari McGee, who's been able to supply the team with 11 points per contest, relatively good junior college transfer. He's gotten about 12.7 boards out of Christian Coleman as well. Like what he's able to bring to the table after he began his career at the non-D1 ranks, but on the flip side, Middle Tennessee, they dealt with a lot of injuries last season, and now they're back in full force. You've got a guy in Justin Porter who's able to give you 16.5 points per game. And for Middle Tennessee, never been a great three-point shooting team. Porter shoots 41.5% from three, but as a collective, they shoot 31% from the outside. But have to like what you've been able to get out of Kamari Lands, who's come in from Louisville with 11.5 points per contest. And then Issa Mustafa, while he's not going to be able to by himself win the battle down low, I do think that UAB still wins that battle. He's rock solid. He's able to give you 14 points, 8.5 boards. Not a guy that's going to stretch a floor or anything like that. But Middle Tennessee, pretty good at being able to generate turnovers with guys like Cameron Weston, Jalen Counter, both being able to give you about a steal per contest. Counter comes in after he was that main scorer over at IUPUI a few seasons ago, and you've got the depth back with this team with guys like Justin Burford being able to give you some nice contributions after he last year had to be thrusted into a starter's role. Clearly wasn't a starter, but a guy that's able to come in off the bench, hit a few shots, generate some turnovers, give you some stretchability. Do like what I'm seeing out of Middle Tennessee. I do think that they're going to be able to hold up down low with Mustafa, so I did set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to take those points, and I did set my total at 150 as well. Middle Tennessee, I think, is going to be able to make things relatively sloppy, and UAB has been struggling a little bit with their three-point shooting. So, going to be looking at the under and the points with Middle Tennessee, 689, 690 on the betting board. It is Central Florida. They play host to Cal Baptist. Cal Baptist, a 10.5 to an 11-point underdog. 146 to 147.5 is that total, and with Central Florida, I did set them as a 10.5 point favorite, so at an 11 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Cal Baptist. Cal Baptist seems to be playing a little bit more up-tempo this season after I always argued that this team had such good scores that they shouldn't be playing as slowly as they had been, and now they're starting to get out there in a little bit more full force. For Cal Baptist, you bring in a guy in A.J. Brown, who last season was over at Wright State. He's been able to do a nice job down low. Not a guy that's going to stretch a floor and give you a lot of three-point shooting or anything like that, but has been able to do a nice job being able to throw in there right around about 6-7 rebounds per game. Kendall Coleman has been that main guy with 8 boards per contest, and you've got your 20-point per game scorer back in Dominique Daniels, who, when he was out there on the floor last season for this Cal Baptist team, they were something in the neighborhood of, I would like to say, 13-8 without him. They were 5-9. He was a big difference maker for them, 15 plus points in pretty much every single game thus far this season. And then you got Darius Johnson on the flip side for Central Florida, who's having to carry this team with the Jalen Sellers injury. He's been able to supply the team along Jordan Ivy Curry, 17 points per contest. These two guys are combining for 4 steals. They're combining for about 7 assists per game, but Johnson shooting 50% from 3 for a team that's shooting as collective 32% from the outside. Nobody else on the roster is really shooting north of 33% from 3-point range, and they were without Mustafa Thiam in their game a few days ago against UW Milwaukee. I factored him out of the lineup, and that helps out Cal Baptist a little bit down low. Now, it's a little bit of body clock game for Cal Baptist. They have to go from west to east, so that's going to be a little bit rough on them, but they do have some depth with regards to this team with Martell Williams coming in from Southern Utah. He was never really able to get the full shine that he was deserving of. He's been able to give the team 10 points per contest, so like what he's doing there, and I believe he spent a year at the non-D1 ranks as well. You've also been able to get some good three-point shooting out of Javante Johnson as well. Johnson comes in after he was last year over at Colorado State, where he was underutilized. He actually used to be a starter over at New Mexico, and his career 36% three-point shooter at 6'6", able to give you some good rebounding for the Central Florida team. They're in transition down low with Keyshawn Hall being a nice, shall we say, do-it-all sort of player. Comes in for George Mason, 2.5 assists, 7 boards, 15.5 points per game. Has worked on that jump shot a little bit as well, but I do think that Cal Baptist is going to be able to hold in there, especially with Central Florida dealing with that Thiam injury that kept him out in that game against UW Milwaukee. And again, do like the way that Cal Baptist has been able to crank up their tempo a little bit more this season, as they've been able to get to at least the 77-point plateau in 4 of their last 5 games. So my total 148.5 in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the 11 plus here with Cal Baptist. 691, 692 on the betting board. Missouri State hits a road face-off against Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts 3 to 3.5 point home underdog. Settles between 142.5 to 143.5. Set my line at 2.5, so at a 3 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts, a team that very much is looking to light it up from 3-point range. They've always had their issues defensively, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job against a Missouri State team that they've surprised a lot of people. They played that nice game on the road against Butler to begin the season. They were able to pull off a nice upset or two out there at the Cayman Islands Classic, being able to pull it off against High Point. They pushed Boston College overtime, so all in all, like what I'm seeing there, it's a Missouri State unit that is currently headlined by Des White, who comes on over from Austin Peay, 17 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Things need to be cleaned up a little bit for Missouri State, as they are currently turning the ball over about 13.5 times per contest, but I do like that you've got some good stretchability out of Michael O.C. Bonoso. He had 6'4", is able to give you 9.5 points, 7 boards. Not a guy that's really going to light it up from three-point range, and that's where Oral Roberts is going to be looking to remain lively in this game. It's an Oral Roberts team that they shoot 36% from three-point range as a collective, and this is with Isaac McBride, who last year gave the team 19 points per contest, giving you only about 14 points per game. He's been shooting less than 30% from three-point range, so I do think that he's going to be able to pick it up a little bit. They've got some improved rebounding with Sam Aljiki, who comes on over from Cal. He's been able to give you 13.5 points, 6.5 boards. Believe he sent a season over at Rice as well, but he's been able to find his footing, shooting 40% from three, and out of your top 6 scorers for the Oral Roberts team, all but one of them, that would be McBride, who I mentioned, are shooting at least 40% from three-point range. This is a Missouri State team that, as a collective, they are 231st in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage, shoots up well north of 35% when they're on the road. I do think that Oral Roberts going to be able to hit quite a few shots, remain lively in this game, so I did make my total 152.5. I will most likely write this up for the VSiN website. I am in on the over, and at 3+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Oral Roberts. 693, 684 on the betting board. You've got yourself Hofstra against Arkansas State. This is another game without numbers, as they're playing out there in the Bahamas, and these two teams, they played yesterday. So I've got my handicap. I said Arkansas State as a 4-point favorite, so need at least 5 to be able to take a shot on Hofstra. 4 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Arkansas State. And then in terms of the total, semi-total where a 142 or less, I'm in on the over, a 143 or higher. I do like the under, just not the same Hofstra offense that we've seen in past years. And we've noticed that Arkansas State has been able to play a little bit better defensively as well. And Arkansas State was a team that last year they were a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home, but on the road they were not necessarily that same team. And for Hofstra, they're just looking for answers outside of Gene Amarujan. Amarujan has been able to do a good job giving this team double figures. He's able to throw in their 5+ boards and has all sorts of versatility. Last year when he was over at Iona, shot about 40% from three-point range, but you just don't have that same facilitator like you had a season ago. And Juan Carlos, when he was able to give the team 5 assists, was able to do a nice job of just being able to keep that free-flowing offense going. And then for Arkansas State, they do bring in a guy that I think is going to be able to win the battle down low, and Rashad Marshall. Last season, he was over at Ole Miss. He, this season, has been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. Now, you do have Michael Graham on the flip side for Hofstra. Hofstra traditionally a team that's outside the top 200 in terms of rebound rate, but they seem to be doing a little bit better on that front this season. But what they have been able to do a little bit better on the rebound front, they've been lacking a little bit more offensively, causing them to play a little bit more slowly. So makes this a very interesting ordeal in general with an Arkansas State team that they were playing very frenetically last season, and they seem to have reeled it in a little bit more this season. Kobe Julien comes in from Louisiana. He's right now giving the team 13 points, 5.5 boards. Nice stat sheet suffer. And then you've got a pair of forwards who are built for tough, and Terrence Ford Jr. along Darian Ford. Darian Ford, he's been able to give you a little bit more in terms of just the overall shooting. Shot 37.5% from three-point range last season, double-figure score. And then Terrence Ford, a bit more of the facilitator with about 4 assists per contest. So interesting ordeal here with Arkansas State. I did set them as a 4.5-point favorite. Willing to lay up to 4 there. And then with 5 or more, I'd be willing to take the points with Hofstra, and then 142 or less, and on the over 143 or higher, the under. 695, 696 on the betting board. Portland is going to be playing us to Denver. The Pioneers of Denver are going to look to pioneer a cover as 5 to 5.5 point underdogs. Totals between 148 to 149. Made Portland a 6-point favorite, so you're at 5 to 5.5. Wouldn't want to go any further, but going to be willing to lay the number with Denver. It has been a very tumultuous season for them. They looked absolutely awful a few nights ago against Utah Tech, a game where I thought that they were going to clearly play much better, but they've already knocked off Montana State as well. So it's been a very up-down, all-around sort of game, but for Denver, where I think they're going to lose this game is down low. You do have the 7-footer, and Isaiah Carr has been able to give you 7.5 points, 5 boards, but just hasn't been overall super effective when he has been out there on the floor. Meanwhile, Austin Ropp, he comes on over from the country of Australia. He's 6'10" freshman, has really been good for this Portland team. About 12 points, 2.5 assists, 6.5 boards. He's got some versatility to be able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. I think that that's going to go downward as the season goes along, but you also have Vukasin Masic, 13.5 points, 4.5 boards. I just think that you got a little bit too much size along the perimeter for this Denver team to really be able to keep up, as right now you've been able to get about 12 points, 4.5 boards out of Nick Shabongo. He comes over from the junior college level, and he's been able to give you a bit of production, 35% three-point shooting. And then one of your main guys from a season ago, Isaiah Adu Ankara. He's really one of the few of their top 6 scorers from a season ago. That's back, as he's been able to shoot about 37% from 3, 6'7", a little bit of a combo player for a Denver team that's right now turning the ball over 15 times per game. They really need to iron that out. And for Denver, because they do have elevation on their side, they're typically a team that you want to back much more at home rather than on the road, like DeAndre Craig. He's been able to give you 10.5 points, 3.5 assists, but those 3.5 turnovers per game, they have been costly. And for Portland, they push Oregon to overtime on the road already this season, but they've had a lot of less than savory results. They're turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game, and they just need more out of Chris Austin. This guy was a starter during the 2021-22 season, averaged 14 points per game, got injured for the entirety of the 2022-23 season, and since then has been averaging about 6.5 points per contest. So it is a interesting case between a pair of teams that have been, shall we say, floundering a little bit. I did set my total 148. Both of these teams just turn the ball over a little bit too much to be able to get clean possessions, to be able to get the over. So in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 with Portland. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. And it's another game that's off the board. Indiana State and Tarleton St. They'll be doing battle out there from the Bahamas. And I set Indiana State as an 8-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 with them, 8.5 or more, taking out points with Tarleton State. And then I did set my total to where a 145.5 or less. I'm in on the over 146.5 or higher. The under with Tarleton State. Just a lot of sloppiness with this team all season long, but you know what? They were able to do a much better job yesterday. Perhaps we're starting to see the tide shift just a little bit for them as they got a win over Hofstra by kind of 61-59. The big fear that you do have with this entire game is the Tarleton St turnovers. They had 14 turnovers yesterday, which is much better than what it has been in the past for them, as right now they're playing with about, I would say, 5.5 guys, because Chris Mbakpa, he's their top rebounder. He was averaging going into the game yesterday about 7 rebounds per game. He left the game after 5 minutes. That's not necessarily where you want to be if you're the Tarleton State team, but they also go up against an Indiana State team that, man, it's been not necessarily so great for them. Indiana State lost darn near everything from a season ago, and for Indiana State, while they do a pretty rock-solid job in terms of giving you some three-point shooting, you've got Samaje Teal, who's been able to give you 16 points per contest. He's been able to do all 5 assists per game. Indiana State, sometimes it just feels like plays a little bit too fast for their own good, as they're turning the ball over 15 times per game. They're not the same three-point shooting team that they were a season ago, shooting as collective about 34% from three-point range. Kamani Doty, he's come in, he's been able to give the team 10 points per game after last year. He was over at Utah Valley, career about 35.5% three-point shooter at 6'5", so like to see that in Aaron Gray. He's able to give you 7 rebounds per game with Mbakpa seemingly out with an injury due to what happened yesterday. That's going to be able to give Indiana State a little bit of an edge there, but I mean, it's not like either of these teams are necessarily running great offense. And then you do have for Tarleton State a nice go-to scorer in Boo Boo Benjamin. He's been able to give the team 15.5 points per game. For Tarleton, you were just expecting more guys to be out there on the floor, as you've got a Baylor transfer into Twan Grimes, who has yet to be able to get out there. Their top scorer from 2 seasons ago, Freddie Hicks, he went to Arkansas State last year. He transferred back into the program. He just has not hit the floor. I'm not sure if these guys are dealing with injuries, eligibility concerns, but it's been less than tremendous for Tarleton State. They've had a tough time scoring, as they've scored 61 points or fewer in 5 out of their last 6 games, but boy, oh boy, have they been willing to give up the points. And then for Indiana State, you've got a unit that has given up north of 80 points in each of their last 3 games. So it's a good old situation of something he's got to give. That's why I did set a little bit higher total. I think that this is going to be a little bit of some happy action fun time in this one. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 with Indiana State 8.5 or more, taking those points with Tarleton. And then with my total 145.5 or less, and on the over 146.5 or higher, the under. And now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306.559, 306.560. This is another game that's off the board out there at the Palestra. You've got Navy and Maine doing battle. I set Maine as the favorite of 2.5 points. One to lay up to 2 with them. 3 or more taking those points with Navy. And then 134 or less, I'm in on the over. 135 or higher, the under. It's a Navy unit that has Don Draper down low. I think it's going to be the best little post player in this game. He's been able to supply this Navy team with well north of 6 rebounds per game. And then Austin Bencini has been a really nice scorer for Navy. He's been able to supply the team with about 17 to 18 points per game, but this is an AV team that's going to need to take extra care of the ball, because you've got on the flip side Kellen Tynes, who led all of college basketball in terms of steals 2 seasons ago. He's giving you double figures, 3+ assists per game. Now, to Navy's credit, they're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and they've been able to find quite a bit more this season with Aiden Cohey, who's been able to give you at 6'10", right around about 9 or so points per game. He's throwing in there 7 boards, and a little bit of a rough one yesterday against Elon, but it feels like the depth of this team is really starting to expand a little bit more. But for Maine, you've got a guy in AJ Lopez who's able to give you about 13.5 points per game for Maine. They had a little bit of a less than savory result yesterday against Penn, but overall this team has been able to do a nice job locking teams down from 3-point range. And Christopher Mantis, who comes over from Appalachian State, he had some versatility at 6'7". He's been able to give this team north of 33% 3-point shooting. He's throwing in there about 7 points, 4 boards per contest. So like what he's able to bring to the table. And I think that's going to be a little bit too much for Navy and what I think is going to be a slow slobber knocker of a game, and both teams do a solid job of being able to generate turnovers. So 134 or less in on the over, 135 or higher the under. Want to lay up to a deuce with Maine, 3 or more, taking those points with Navy. 306-561, 306-562. It is Maryland, and they're going to be playing us Alcorn St. Alcorn St, an underdog of 31 to 31.5 points. Total on this game is between 138 to 138.5. Did somebody total 143? I'm in on the over as an Alcorn St team as well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that they are going to get bludgeoned down low by this Maryland unit that has so many guys they're able to pull on the board. It says you got Derek Queen along Julian Reese. These two guys have been able to combine for 16 rebounds per game, and Queen has really been able to give this team a nice low post presence in terms of the offensive side of things, as he's been able to log for the team 16 points per game. Got a Maryland team that's cut down on the turnovers as well. Just 9 turnovers per game out of them, while they do a nice job of still being able to generate turnovers, turn defense into offense. Still not a great 3-point shooting team, but Rodney Rice, who comes on over for Virginia Tech, shooting 39% from 3, 12.5 points per game. Still need to see a little bit of something out of Deshaun Harris-Smith, who just has not been really good for the team in general. But on the flip side for Alcorn State, you don't have a single guy in this lineup that's able to give you double figures. And for Alcorn State, you don't need a dominant scorer. The whole is always greater than the sum of its parts for the team. But Marcus Sankersley, 14-point per game scorer last season over at Detroit, only giving you 6 points per contest. That's an issue. Jaquil Gaines-Watt has been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game, so he's been able to give you a little bit. But this Alcorn State team, typically they do a relatively solid job of being crafty, being able to generate some turnovers. Haven't necessarily done as much of that this season. They're certainly going to lose that battle down low, but you have been able to get about 6 rebounds and 5.5 points per game out of Dahai Banah. He comes over and he's been able to give this team just a little bit of size down low after being a part-time starter 8 seasons ago. So it's an interesting case here. I do think that Alcorn State very much going to be giving it up. I set my total at a 143, so I'm in on the over end for Maryland. I can't believe I'm laying this big of a number with them, but they blew out Alcorn State in a similar spot last season. I think that they do it once again. I'm willing to lay up to 32.5 with Maryland, set them as a 33-point favorite, and in on the over. 36-563, 36-564. It is UMass, and they're going to be playing against NJIT. This will be a game that I write up, and for UMass, area 16.5-point favorite. Total on this game is 140 to 140.5, and I'm going to be writing up the over as I set my total more around a 144.5. Got a UMass team that has not been doing the most savory job on defense, and they get to go up against an NJIT team that's right around about 275th themselves in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and UMass, top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game at home. So they've been still playing at a pretty rapid pace. You're going to expect that from Frank Martin coach teams, and when it comes to this NJIT unit, you do have a guy in Tariq Francis who's actually the top scorer out there in this game. He's been able to supply 19 points thus far this season. Have an NJIT team that has been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of guys like Levi Luell, Tim Moore being able to combine for about 9 rebounds per contest, and for NJIT, they do shoot in the mid-30s, about 32.5% from 3-point range, but you've got a UMass team that also has been looking a little bit more to their guard play, as Jalen Curry has been able to give you 14.5 points per contest. You've got a UMass team as a whole, they're shooting just 25.5% from 3. This should be going northward sooner rather than later, especially against an NJIT team that has been leaving a whole heck of a lot to be desired on that front. So, did set my total 144.5. I'm going to be on the over, and I did set my line at a 16.5. I'm mostly seeing 16.5 right now. I was seeing a few stray 16s popping up a bit earlier. If we can get back to a 16, going to be willing to lay it to go along with this total over. 306-565, 306-566. It is Niagara, and they're going to be playing against Long Island. Another game with no numbers, as both of these teams played yesterday, part of a multi-team event, but I have my handicap. Set Niagara as a 4-point favorite and made my total a 146. So 3.5 or less, willing to lay with Niagara. 4.5 or more, won't take the points with Long Island. Then 147.5 or less, in on the over. 148.5 or higher, the under. Certainly think that Niagara is going to score more than the less than 20 points than they did in the first half yesterday. That was just an ugly slog. And you've got a Long Island team that I'm starting to feel quite a bit more bullish about. They bring in Gerald Gillian, the former coach of Chicago State, as their new associate head coach. He's helping out Hot Rod Strickland, and the team has been able to turn around, and part of the turnaround has been Malachi Davis as well. Comes on over from Arizona State, and he has been tremendous, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, giving the team 18 points, throwing out there north of 3 assists per game. Just looks like like a different breed compared to everyone else out there in the Northeast Conference. And then for Niagara, they lose so much of their three-point shooting from a season ago, but they just stockpile with a bunch of really good shooters that have come in, and, well, they didn't shoot well yesterday, but overall, sans yesterday, I've been able to do a nice job being able to pop it from three-point range. Got so many guys like a Jaden Marshall who comes on over from Omaha. He's about 6'4", 6'5", shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, entered into ESA, averaging about 10.5 points per contest. Justice Smith, he was someone that was over at ETSU, was never really truly an amazing three-point shooter. Comes in, he's been able to shoot at about 38.5% from three-point range. He's been able to give the team 10 points per contest. Things have been really led by Amaldi Aldoun. Hopefully you said that correctly. He's been able to give the team north of 13 points per contest after beginning his career at Ohio. So just Greg Paul's doing a nice job being able to mix and match. And then for Long Island, they should be able to do a relatively solid job down low. I know they missed a few games to begin the season, but the freshman in Shardark Lazou, he's come in. He's been able to give the team north of 6 rebounds per game. You really don't have a ton of size with this Niagara team with Harlan Obiana transferring in the offseason. Now, this team in Long Island has been without Brent Davis for much of the season, and he should be out once again. He's missed each of the last 5 games. Someone that came over, Gerald Gillian, over from Chicago State, does a nice job being able to generate turnovers, but guys like Terrell Strickland and company have been able to pick it up. I do think that you're going to be able to get a little bit more on both fronts in terms of scoring and rebounding from Jamal Fuller, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest in that overtime loss against Binghamton yesterday. 27 points, 10 rebounds. He's really been emerging for the team, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. In the end, I do think that Niagara has just a little bit too much from the outside, and that Brent Davis injury currently hurting Long Island, but willing to take 4.5 or more with Long Island, 3.5 or less, one to lay with Niagara. Do think that you get an up and down game in this one, so semi-total to where a 147.5 or less, and on the over 148.5 or higher, the under with Long Island, giving up 75 plus in each of their last 6 games. 306-567, 306-568, and it's Central Connecticut, and they play us to UMass Lowell, and Lowell is a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, and your total between 145.5 to a 147, and for Lowell, I set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the north of 3 here with Central Connecticut, but I'm very impressed by this team. Even though they do lose much of that backcourt from the season ago, they've still been able to remain very lively, and they do still have one of their top guys from a season ago has really become that main man this season in Jordan Jones, who's been able to supply the team with about 14 points, 3.5 assists per game. On the flip side, you do have a UMass Lowell team that should be able to win the battle down low. Max Brooks, a 2-time All-AEC defender, is giving you 8.5 boards, 2+ blocks per game, but Abdul Mamoa has been able to step up big time down low for Central Connecticut. Last year, he gave the team more like 4 boards per contest. This year, in a bigger role, 1.5 blocks, 6 rebounds, 7 points per game. It's a Central Connecticut team that can be a little bit hit or miss from the outside, but what they do a good job of is just making sure that they get clean shots. They are turning the ball over just 9.5 times per game, forcing about 8.5 steals per game, with Joe Ostrowski doing a nice job of just doing the little things. 2 steals, 2.5 assists, only about 6 points per contest, but also throws in there 4 rebounds per game. And then you've got a UMass Lowell team that they do turn the ball over a lot. They're turning the ball over north of 15 times per game, even with having Yuri Covington off the ball, shooting 40% from three-point range. It's just hard to be able to overcome that many turnovers. It's a UMass Lowell team that's playing at one of the more rapid paces in all of college basketball. Central Connecticut looking to be able to dial it back a little bit more. I do think that Central Connecticut going to be able to dial it back, and this is a UMass Lowell team that they themselves have a pretty good defense. They still have guys like a Cam Morris that have good stretchability, and I like what Anthony Blunt brings to the table down low. So set my line at 2.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Central Connecticut, and here at a north of 145, I set my total at 144.5. I'm in on the under. 365.69, 365.70. St. Francis of Pennsylvania is going to be playing us Radford, and Radford does find themselves as a road favorite of 6 points here total on this game between 137 to 138.5. I set my line at 5.5. So I'm going to be willing to take the 6+ here with St. Francis. St. Francis coming off of a nice win against a Patriot League opponent a few days ago. As they were at home, they got the job done against Lehigh, and the St. Francis team starting to be able to build up a little bit more confidence on offense. The defense still has a lot of work to do. 78+ points given up in 3 out of their last 5 games, and you've got a Radford team that has been able to get back to their identity as well. For Radford, when they've been at their best, they've always been able to play tough down low. They've been able to give you good, rock-solid defense, not necessarily play too fast, and they've only got one guy that's right now averaging double figures. That'd be Jarvis Moss, 17.5 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point, and Radford, a relatively solid three-point shooting team. They're shooting 36% from three-point. The Tennessee Tech transfer in David Early, well, he has been early and often given this team production. He's been able to give them 8 points, shooting north of 45% from three-point. Hasn't necessarily been that dominant scorer that we've seen in past years, but do like what he's been able to do for this team. And then Josiah Harris down low after he missed half the season last year. He's been able to log for the team a little bit over 7 rebounds per game, 8 points per contest, so like what I'm seeing there. Flip side, though, for the St. Francis, Pennsylvania team is Bobby Rosenberger being able to give you 13.5 points per game for St. Francis. They're going to have a bit of a tough time down low, but the East Carolina transfer in Valentino Pinedo has been able to give you good size at 6'8", 8 points, 7 boards. Not a guy that's really going to be stretching you out, taking you to the 3-point line or anything like that, but it's a St. Francis team that's starting to take better care of the ball, and they need to. 16 turnovers per game, that's a little bit less than savory, but they've also been able to force a few turnovers with Jeremy Clayville being able to give you 2 steals, 2 assists, 10 points per contest, and I think that that's going to be just enough for St. Francis to be able to remain lively in this one. I did select all 135.5. Again, this is a Radford team that's really looking to slow these games down, play a little bit more defense-oriented, so I'm in on the under, and I'm in on 6+ here with St. Francis. 306-571, 306-572. Arkansas Pine Bluff hits a road face-off against Kansas State. Kansas State, a 34-point favorite, and your total is 155.5. No chance I'm willing to lay it here with Kansas State. I set my line at 25.5. Recognize that Arkansas Pine Bluff in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's been less than tremendous for them to start the season. They've also played against one of the most brutal schedules in all of college basketball. And additionally, we saw Kansas State leading by just 2 points at the half less than 2 weeks ago against Mississippi Valley State. I guess you could call it even worse version of Arkansas Pine Bluff, as Pine Bluff has Christian Morrissey, but give you more 3.5 assists, 12 points per contest. Certainly Coleman Hawkins has a lot of versatility, and Kansas State should be able to win this game by well north of 30 points. Hawkins does a bit of everything with 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2 steals, a block and a half, so you love what he's able to bring to the table. Doug McDaniel has become that main point guard with north of 5 assists per contest, and it's a Kansas State team that they shoot it relatively well from 3. They're shooting about 35% from 3, but there's just something about this team that has been off this year. David Ngesson has been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Max Jones along with Brandon Housen, these are really nice spot-up shooters. Combined shoot 40% from 3-point range. They've dealt with a few injuries with Akura Ogenyo Anesu. I know that he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury as well, but for Arkansas Pine Bluff, having Robert Lewis down low, giving you 6.5 rebounds per game is big. You bring in the Monmouth transfer, Mr. Clement Vuga, who's been able to give you 11 points, 5.5 boards at Ubachaka. He's giving you just 8% 3-point shooting, as Pine Bluff as a collective, they shoot just 30.5% for 3-point. Do you think that that should be going a little bit northward as the season goes along? And Quentin Bolton is a guy that I think has a little bit of upside as well. When I've been watching him play, when he's gotten his minutes, he's been able to do a relatively solid job, as he's given the team 16 points in the last 3 games. He's shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, so I do think that with Pine Bluff, they do find a way to be able to remain lively. Do think that this is going to be very much an up-and-down game. Again, Pine Bluff, one of the worst teams offensively in all of college basketball, and they're playing at a pretty rapid pace. So, somebody total 157.5 in on the over, but won't take those points with Pine Bluff, set them as a 25.5 point underdog. 306-573, 306-574. Fairfield is playing us to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as a underdog of 6.5 points. 151 to 153.5 is your total, and for Fairfield, I set them as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Fairfield. They've done a really nice job in terms of being able to replace the backcourt from a season ago, because you lose the guys like Jasper Floyd, you lose a really good 3-point shooter in Bryson Goodine, and that can be very difficult to be able to turn over a new leaf from, and they had that less than savory loss against Yale about a week or so ago, but then the next day they bounce back, they get that nice win against Vermont, and the guy that has really been the prophet for this team has been Prophet Jones. 11.5 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, doing a nice job of just giving this team exactly what they need, and you're going to need to get a little bit more out of Louis Bleachmore. He stands right around about 6'5". He's able to give you some nice outside shooting. He's put in there 8.5 points on 35% 3-point shooting, and for Fairfield, I do think that their 27.5% 3-point shooting will ascend, but they're doing a good job of winning the turnover battle. They're forcing north of 7.5 steals per game. They're turning the ball over themselves just 10 times per contest. Now you need more down low, as Prophet Johnson is the only guy that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. You've got Peyton Smith, 6'10" big man. He's come in. He's been able to give the team only about 4 rebounds per game, and for Fairleigh Dickinson, typically this is one of the most undersized teams in all of college basketball. That typically they get bludgeoned on the glass, so a little bit of a change of pace for them, as they've got a guy that's been able to be a do-it-all guy sort of as well, and Terrence Brown, 23 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists. This guy's been incredible, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, but part of a Fairleigh Dickinson team that is once again outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now Fairleigh Dickinson is shooting 38.5% from 3-point range, so they've been impressive with that regard. but it does you not so much good when you're allowing opponents to shoot about 35% from three-point range, as well as not being able to hit the boards as well, because you've got only two guys that give you north of 4 rebounds on this team as well. Bismarck Nasia has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and the ancillary scores just have not stepped up the way that you were hoping they would. Joel Emmanuel has been able to give you about 11 points per contest. Dylan Jones comes in from the 91 ranks. He's up to about 11.5, 12 points per contest, shooting about 42% from three-point range, but I do think that for Fairfield, they can get things sorted out with regards to their three-point shooting woes. They're able to turn over Fairleigh Dickinson, a Fairleigh Dickinson team that has certainly been all over the place this season, but we know that they're going to give up the points against D1 teams. They have given up at least 78, and I believe all but one of their games thus far this season, so we'll dive in on Fairfield, made them a 10-point favorite, and semi-total at 154, so I'm also in on this total over. 306.575, 306.576. It is Fordham, and they play us in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a 14.5 to a 15-point dog. Total this game between 137.5 to a 139. Made Fordham the 13-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with New Hampshire. It's very much a new-look team. They lose so much of what they had from a season ago, but also with this Fordham team, I think that they just need a little bit more than Jackie Johnson Jr. doing it all, and that win that they had against Seton Hall diminishes a little bit by the fact that Monmouth also knocked off Seton Hall now as well, but Anthony McComb, he's been able to come in for New Hampshire from Bowling Green, and he's supplied the team with 14 points per contest, really the lone of their top 6 scorers that's back from a season ago in Trey Woodyard. He's been dealing with a bit of an injury, so that has been hurting this team a little bit for Woodyard. He's at 6'6", gives you versatility with about 3 assists, 3.5 boards, quite a bit of scoring, so he'll probably be out of the fold once again in this one, but it's not like for Fordham, you've got like absolutely amazing three-point shooting with this team, as Johnson overall has been able to do a pretty solid job. He's shooting about 33% from three-point, and the team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from the outside. Now, they do a nice job of generating steals, and it's been a trip for them, as Jamari Tripp has been able to give you 2.5 assists, 2.3 steals, 11.5 points per contest, but you're expecting perhaps a little bit more out of someone like a Yafat Metter, who he's back from a season ago after he was their top scorer last year with about 10 points per contest. Joshua Rivera comes in from Bryant. He's giving you about 10.5 points per contest. I like what Abdul Sambilia is able to do down low. He and Romad Dean both give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and Sambilia, year in and year out, one of the better shot blockers that you're going to find in all of college basketball. He's been able to supply the team with a block and a half per contest, but I do think that for this New Hampshire team, even though they're in a little bit of mix and match mode, they should be able to hold in there with the Temple transfer of Emmanuel Okpomo being able to give you 4.5 to 5 boards per contest in the glass, and Sammy Pasisis has been able to dole out about 3 assists per game, while Will Richardson has been able to do a lot of the similar things for Fordham as well. New Hampshire has not been as good of a three-point shooting defense as they were a season ago after they were a top 20 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage a season ago, but I do think that they do enough to make this just a little bit of a, shall we say, gross sort of game to be able to hold in there. I did set my total on 145. New Hampshire has slowed down their tempo a little bit from past years, but they're still a relatively up-tempo team, and you've got a Fordham team that year in and year out, they're looking to play very fast, and they've given up 73-plus points, and now each out of their last 4 games against C1 competition, so I'm going to be in on the over, and we're going to be willing to take those points with New Hampshire. 306.577, 306.578. Tennessee State is going to be playing with UNC Asheville. Asheville is between a 1-point favorite to a 1-point dog. Totals between 152.5 to a 153, and with UNC Asheville, made them the 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1/ take them as a money line underdog. For Tennessee State, it's been a bit wobbly in terms of their low post play, as you've been able to get really good production out of Brandon Weston, who's able to give you 18 points per game, but the team as a whole shooting 29% from three-point range. Weston shooting just 26% from the outside, and the 15 turnovers per game, that's a little bit less than savory. You've been able to have Amir Langlis, who comes in from USC Upstate, do a nice job, supply the team with about 7 rebounds per game. Carlos Williams, who was at Tulsa a season ago, he's been able to supply about 5+ boards per contest as well. And then the 7-footer from Iowa, and Josh Ogundele, he's been able to give you about 4 rebounds. Doesn't necessarily have the world's greatest cardio in the world, but you know what? He's able to provide a little bit of size. But with UNC Asheville, even though they do lose Drew Pember from a season ago, they lose Nicholas McMillan, who was so good down low. Don't call him maybe, because it's Fletcher Aby, who's been able to do a nice job, giving this team double figures. It's a really nice three-point shooting team. You've got Josh Banks, who's back from a season ago. Banks has been able to shoot for his career north of 35% from three-point range. He's able to give this team double figures as well for UNC Asheville. Biggest thing is being able to set themselves up for those three-point shots, because typically with teams that shoot it really well from three-point range, they turn the ball over a little bit too much, and they're 12 turnovers per game. It's not necessarily too bad for the style that they play. They overall are shooting about 35% from three-point range as a collective. It is a top top-heavy team. Right now, 4 guys are giving you north of 12.5 points per contest, and then pretty much one other guy that gives you north of 6 points per contest, as Jordan Marsh has stepped up. He's been able to log for the team 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, and then you've been able to get some good play down low out of Toya Solomon, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, 8.5 boards. But with that said, with UNC Asheville, I do think that what Solomon is able to provide down low, having those threats on the outside in Asheville, doing a better job of taking care of the ball than Tennessee State, allows them to be able to get the job done against a Tennessee State team that all of a sudden against D1 competition, they have given up 71 plus points in each of their last 4 games. So I'm going to be willing to take UNC Asheville as a very small favorite here, and did some I total at 152.5. So here in this spot, I'm going to be willing to lay that small number, and at a 153 or higher, that'll begin to be my buy point on the under with the Tennessee State turnovers. 3 of 6, 579, 3 of 6, 580. Lafayette and Binghamton do battle. This is a game that's off the board because both of these teams played yesterday, but I do have my handicap as I did set Lafayette as a 2.5 point favorite. Willing to lay up to a deuce with them, 3 or more. Taking those points with Binghamton, and then a 134 or less in on the over. 135 or higher, going to be in on the total under for Lafayette. They're a very slow and controlled team, but they're not necessarily the world's greatest defense. They do now get Justin Vanderbaum back. He's a true 7-footer, began his career over at Boston College. He's able to give you multiple blocks per contest at 11 points, 8 rebounds, and the team's win yesterday to be able to pace them. Don't have a ton in the backcourt right now, as you've got Mark Butler, who's been able to supply for the team about 7 points per game. Not a guy, though, that's really going to stretch you out from the outside, despite being just 5'10". He's looking to pass a little bit more. And then on the flip side, you've got a Binghamton team that you've got a lot of stretchability, a lot of versatility, but a team that doesn't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to take care of the ball. You should have Kevin Walsh be able to do a nice job down low for this team with about 9.5 rebounds per game, but again, going against Vanderbaum, that's going to be a little bit difficult for Binghamton. They do, though, as a collective, shoot 36% from 3-point range. Ben Callahan Gold along Temu Chenery. These have been your lone 2 double-figure scores, combining for about 25.5 points per game going into yesterday. Both shooting north of 40% from 3-point range as well. It is a little bit of a top-heavy team. You've had Jason Bengini, who he comes on over from Stonehill from a season ago for Jackson Bengini. He's been out of the lineup for pretty much all but 2 games this far this season, and I was just expecting a whole heck of a lot more this season out of Wes Peterson Jr. He's only been able to give you about 2.5 points per contest. Someone I thought was on the come up after he was just glued to the bench over at Delaware from a season ago. I thought that was a good transfer ad right now. Just hasn't given you too much. But Nima Benson, he's been able to do a nice job down low, 4.5 boards, comes on over from Ryder and was a part-time starter season ago. You need him to get back into form a little bit more when he was scoring about 10.5 points per game, but at 6'7", provides a little bit of stretchability. But I think that Vanderbaum being back for a Lafayette team that does a relatively good job of taking care of the ball, and this is a Binghamton team that, while they turn it over a ton, they don't force a lot of turnovers themselves. I think that allows Lafayette to get it done in a close game. So willing to lay up to 2 with Lafayette, 3 or more, taking the points with Binghamton, 134 or less, and on the over 135 or higher. The under 36.581, 36.582. It is Minnesota playing us to Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman does find themselves as an underdog of 16 points. Total on this game is 128, and at anything of 15 plus, won't take the points with Cookman, set them as a 14.5 point underdog. Minnesota has by far the best player out there on the floor, and Dawson Garcia has been able to log north of 20 points per game, but Minnesota team that has been dealing with all sorts of injuries in the backcourt, as you've got Mark Mitchell, who has been out really since the first 2 games of the season. We have yet to see Tyler Cochran out there on the floor either. You finally got a little bit of an explosion offensively from this Minnesota unit in their last game, but all in all, this has been a team that's been very much built on defense, as Minnesota's right now giving up just 58.5 points per game. Meanwhile, Bethune-Cookman, they're looking to play a little bit more of a high-octane style with Tristan Freeman, who was a double-figure scorer over at Rhode Island 2 seasons ago, leading the way with about 16 points per game. It's a Bethune-Cookman team that they do shoot just 30% from 3-point range, but they generate about 8 steals per game each other top 3 scorers, and Freeman throwing their Reggie Ward, who's been able to give you 11.7 boards per contest, and then Trey Thomas, who's been able to give you about 12 points per game after being at Hampton last season. They all give you at least 1.3 steals per game as well, and G&I Hunt, who's been missing for a little bit of time this season. He's probably going to be out in full once again. He's their main facilitator. That does hurt this Bethune-Cookman offense just a little bit, but even with him being out, I did set my total at a 134.5. I'm going to be in on the over because I do think that you get a little bit more out of Jesus Caballero moving forward. A former guy that was able to give Campbell double figures a few seasons ago, was able to bust out a little bit more in the team's last game. 9 points, pair of blocks, pair of steals, just doing a nice job being able to stuff the stat sheet in general. And I do think that for Minnesota, you just have a team that in general is going to start to shoot a tad bit better from 3-point range. Lucia Patterson has been able to do an okay job doling out the ball, 10 points, 4 assists per game for Minnesota. They're only turned the ball for 10.5 times per contest, but they're shooting 26.5% from 3 and sub 60% free throw shooting. That's a bit of an issue. You've been able to get a little bit more offense, though, out of Femi Odekale. It was just as cold as an igloo to start the season. 20 points in the last 2 games. Should be able to get him out of that rut just a little bit. So, do you think that this settles a skoge low? Set my total at 134.5. I'm in on the over, but with Minnesota still dealing with those injuries in the backcourt, do like the points here with Bethune-Cookman. 306-583, 306-584. It is the men of Troy, and they play us the Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky is a 6.5 to a 7-point underdog. Total on this game between 146.5 to a 147.5, and for Troy, I set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Eastern Kentucky. For Troy, they're just too sloppy with the ball right now. They're turning the ball over north of 15 times per contest. They return largely a lot of the same guys from a season ago, with Miles Rigsby being able to give you 11 or 12 points per game. But on the Eastern Kentucky side of things, you have to love what Devontae Blanton has been able to do for the team. He has been at the program for about 1 billion years at this point, but he's supplying 17 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists from 3-point shooting in the mid-30s, and is a career 36% 3-point shooter at 6'6". George Kimball needs to calm down on the turnovers just a little bit, but has been able to supply this team as well with about 13 points, 4.5 assists per game. And Dayton Conway, on the flip side, he's been able to give this Troy team about 4.5 assists per game. Problem is those turnovers. North of 3 turnovers from him and him alone. Thomas Dowd and company should be able to help control things down low, as he and Jackson Fields have been able to combine for 10 rebounds per game. For Troy, though, even though they do a nice job generating those turnovers, as Dayton Conway, who I was mentioning before, does give you about 3 steals per game. With all the turnovers that they have, makes things a little bit sloppy. And Eastern Kentucky is a team that is very proud to be able to run it and gun it, and they're one of the better teams in all of college basketball at generating turnovers, as they've been averaging darn near 10 steals per game as well. Kimball, who I mentioned before, he's been able to give you 2 steals per game. You've got a guy down low in one Mayer Wool, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 6 boards. He generates a little bit over a steal per game as well. And then the Charleston transfer, Jordan Crawford, he's been able to generate nearly 2 steals, 9 points per game while he was at Charleston last year. Mid-33 point shooter. Do think that he's got some upside from the outside for this Eastern Kentucky team, that they do some like hockey style line shifts, as they've got essentially a 9-man rotation that all play at least 12.5 minutes per game. I think that that's going to disrupt a Troy team that is very much looking to create some havoc themselves. I do think that Troy is going to bust out a little bit more with their offense, but I do think that it's going to be both teams generating a lot of turnovers that turn into some easy buckets. So, one, take the points with Eastern Kentucky, set my line at 3.5, and I'm in on the over, set my total 151.5, 306-585, 306-586. It's Bustin, and they're playing us to Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart, an underdog of 7 points, total on this game between 138.5 to 139, and for Bustin, going to set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Sacred Heart. I like the overall versatility that you have for this team. They're going to be having a little bit of a tough time shifting on over to the Metro Atlantic this year, in my opinion, but you do have a pair of guys in Bryce Johnson and Tanner Thomas that both stand right around about 6'6", 6'7", and they're giving you good overall options. As for Johnson, he's giving you 8.5 points, 6.5 boards per game. Thomas down to about 3.5 rebounds per game, but he's shooting north of 50% from 3-point shots and has been leaving something to be desired from the outside. But overall, Sacred Heart shooting 36.5% from 3-point range, and now you've got Anquan Hill activated as well. He over at Fairleigh Dickinson a few seasons ago was a really good freshman that was able to lend versatility, about 8 points, 5.5 boards, and then just couldn't get out there for St. Bonaventure a few seasons ago. Dealt with injuries and missed an entire season. Now he's back, and he's back in full force. Ian Carpenter is still in the backcourt. He's able to give you about 10 points per contest as well. And then on the flip side for Boston U, we got Kyron Alexander has been able to supply the team with 11 points per game, and Miles Brewster, he's back from a season ago after he was their top scorer last year, about 10 points per game. But it's a Boston U team that turns the ball over 15 times per contest, while outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Otto Landrum, one of their top rebounders from a season ago, he has yet to play this far this season, so you've been looking to Malcolm Chamazi and his 6.5 rebounds per game to really carry things down low. And Nico Nobili comes over from Italy. He's been able to get the team about 4 rebounds per game. Boston U, one of the better 2-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball. They do a nice job defensively. They have really not been able to get a lot to go offensively. This is a Sacred Heart team that's looking to push a lot of tempo, so it's a very interesting sort of scheming game in this one. I do think that this is going to be close enough for late game falling. I do think that Sacred Heart is going to be able to get things pumped up just a little bit in terms of that tempo. So I did set my total 139.5. Here at the 138.5. I am in on the over. As for Boston U, they themselves have looked a little bit better with their offense recently. 69 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games, and have shown against teams like UMBC and company that they're willing to run. So in on that over over, but with Sacred Heart, only set them as a 3.5 point dog. So looking at those points, 306, 587, 306, 588. This will be a game that I write up as Quinnipiac is on the road against Stone Hill. Stone Hill, a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Tonight's game between 137.5 to a 139.5. And for Quinnipiac, I set them as a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be writing them up. You bring back Savion Lewis, who is a top 5 player in terms of total assists per game 8 seasons ago. And both of these teams actually have very similar metrics. Both of these teams outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I have much more of a belief that this Quinnipiac team that as a collective last year shot 34.5% from 3-point range turns it around, as they're currently shooting about 24% from 3-point range. You've got Paulo Tino, who down low has been able to give you 11.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, and I think that he's going to be able to dominate there, block and half as well. And then you've been able to get 13.5 points out of Amari Moore, who has been able to do a nice job of being able to give you more. He last year was a stretch player that shot about 35.5% from 3-point range, down to less than 20% thus far this season. And for Lewis, he needs to be a little bit more of an aggressive scorer, in my opinion. Still giving out the 6 assists per game, but just 5 points per contest out of him. And then for Sono, they bring in Joshua Morgan, who was over at Incarnate Word a season ago. He's been able to slide the team with about 15 points per game. Shooting as a collective, Sono is 37% from 3, but the 13.5 turnovers per game have been less than tremendous. We got Todd Bodonga down low, has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, so love what he's able to bring to the table. And Amir Nesbitt, who was on the bench for Hampton a season ago, has been able to do about 3.5 assists per game. You've been able to get a little bit in terms of generating some turnovers out of the Stone Hill team, but this is a Quinnipiac team that they love to play up and down. I think that they're going to be able to get their fast, frenetic style, and I do think that for Stone Hill, a team that has just not been able to gel offensively, in my opinion, still 67 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, are going to have some issues there. I do think that Quinnipiac is going to be able to control this game. I did set this total at a 146.5 because I do think that Quinnipiac gets things a little bit more up and down, and I do think that they're going to exploit a Stone Hill team that's outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. So I am in on this total over, and with Quinnipiac, want to lay it with them, and I did set them as my write-up for this. 306, 589, 306, 590. It is Wofford, and they're playing against North Alabama. Another game that I wrote up with North Alabama being a 3 to 3.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 144.5 to a 145, and I feel like North Alabama should be a 1.5 favorite. So I do like them outright on the money line against a Wofford team that entered into Saturday outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the Wofford defense has just really fallen off a cliff over the last few seasons, and North Alabama is a more efficient offensive team as well. We've got a North Alabama unit that has Jakari Lane, who's giving you 16.5 points, 4 assists per game. He's been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range for North Alabama. They do a nice job being able to value the ball, only about 10.5 turnovers per game. Daniel Ortiz, who 2 seasons ago, he was really the top scorer, went over to UAB last season. He's starting to be able to find his footing once again with this unit, 15 plus points in 3 of the last 4 games. That's a very good sign for them. You don't necessarily have a ton of guys that crash the glass, but you do have Cornelius Williams, who's been able to log 8 rebounds per game, going up against a Wofford team that should have a little bit of an advantage there. Kyler File, which he gives you 3.5 assists, 8.5 boards, 7 points per game, but Chase Comer was the guy that they were banking on being a nice 3-point shooting force, and he pretty much opted out of the season. He hit the transfer portal days before the season started. You've got Anthony Arrington, who was a part-time starter last season, who gave the team 5.5 points per contest, being in a little bit of regression right now. For Wofford, they turned the ball over 13 times per game. I like what you've been able to get out of a pair of guys, and Corey Tripp along with Dylan Bailey, who've been able to combine for 26 points per game, and Bailey shoots 38.5% from the outside. And then the other Bailey and Justin Bailey shooting north of 50% from 3-point range. Certainly do think that there's going to be a little bit of fall off there, but I do think that North Alabama going to be able to hold up in this ordeal. The offense has been very good for them, and this is a Wofford defense that is just at this point getting blowtorched. So I'm going to be willing to take North Alabama outright on the money line, and with regards to this total, I did set mine at a 147.5. Again, even though both of these teams are not necessarily super duper up tempo, I think that North Alabama just executes on offense against a rough defense. So looking at the over, and I wrote up North Alabama. I'm willing to take them on the money line. 36.591, 36.592. It is Nebraska playing us to North Florida. North Florida, a 15.5 to a 16-point dog. Total on this game between 156.5 to a 157. And for Nebraska, I set them as just an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with North Florida. North Florida already has 2 wins against power teams as far this season. Now, I don't think that either of the 2 that they knocked off in South Carolina along Georgia Tech are on the same caliber as Nebraska is, but they're not going to be afraid of the situation. You got a guy in Liam Murphy who was very good as a double-figure scorer a few seasons ago over at Columbia. Got injured for a while now at 6'6". He's been able to show off his versatility and give an option for Jalen Smith to dole the ball out to. Jalen Smith has been able to do a nice job at the point guard spot. 11 points, 5.5 assists per game for a North Florida team that last year led all of D1 college basketball in terms of percentage of shots shots that came from three-point range, and they're shooting 38% from three this year with fewer than 10 turnovers per game. They're going to lose that battle down low, but you still have been able to get about 7.5 rebounds per game out of Josiah Miles, and this is a very deep team that has now 6 different guys. They're able to give you double figures. Now, after those 6 guys, you do have quite a bit of a fall off there, but for Nebraska, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time being able to guard all these guys from three, and they themselves have not really found their point guard yet. Raleigh Worcester, I thought, was going to be the main facilitator for this team. 2.5 assists, 10 points per game. It's left a little bit of something to be desired. Connor Esiason was able to really give this team a nice surge in the last game. He was able to, against South Dakota, put in there 29 points after it was a pedestrian start to the season. I remember at Wisconsin 2 years ago, he was very good. He's back to shooting 37.5% from the outside. And then the UCLA transfer from Turkey and Berkay, Boyatunkel, hopefully I said that correctly. He's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Bryce Williams is going to be the best player out there on the floor for Nebraska at 6'7". He's able to give you 18.5 points. He's shooting 38% from three-point range, throws in their seal per contest as well. But for Nebraska, I think that they're going to have a tough time being able to guard all these guys that just love to light you up from three-point range for North Florida. We have seen this Nebraska team play a little bit more slowly, and I do think that for North Florida, it's going to be a little bit tougher to shoot from the outside in this one. The shooting backdrop in Nebraska in general, it is a little bit wonky out there in Lincoln, but that said, I do think that North Florida, a team that's gotten to at least 75 in each of their last 5 games, they're going to continue their offense and be able to make things lively in this one against a Nebraska team that they themselves have been pretty rock solid with regards to their defense. So I did set my total 153.5 in on the under, and I'm willing to take those points with North Florida. 36-5-93, 36-5-94. It is Xavier, and they're going to be playing us at South Carolina State. South Carolina State, 25 to 26 point dogs, totals between 145 to 146. Another game that I wrote up the over. I set my total 153.5. Have a Xavier team that has left something to be desired on offense, but that's been more away from home. They're averaging more than 20 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than when they are on the road. That was a less than savory effort that we saw a few nights ago against Michigan, but I think that they're going to bounce back with Ryan Conwell being able to supply 17 points per contest. It's a team that's still shooting nearly 40% from three-point range. They go up against a South Carolina State unit that's well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for South Carolina State, they just throw at you a bunch of different looks. I don't even know if they're necessarily good looks. They just throw at you a bunch of different looks because they've got essentially 10 guys at this point. They're playing a double figure amount of minutes, actually 11 different guys. They give you at least 10 plus minutes per contest, and they shoot 36.5% from three-point range, but 13 turnovers per game. You really don't get a lot down lows. You've got one guy that gives you north of 4 boards per contest. That'd be Drayton Jones, and that should allow Zach Fremantle to really be able to have his way down low for Xavier. 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, and shooting about 30% from three-point range. When he played 2 seasons ago, he was shooting north of 60% from distance. You knew that Lightning was not going to strike twice there, but you got Davion McKnight, who's been versatile and has been able to fill the stat sheet for the team. 11 points, 4.5 assists, north of 2 steals per game. You've got Jerome Hunter who's able to give you some ancillary rebounding, and then even someone coming off the bench like Adante Maddox, who's able to give you 5 points per game. He's been a career 40% three-point shooter. So many weapons for the Xavier team against a South Carolina State bunch that they just have not been able to do a great job holding up defensively as well. I do think that Xavier going to be able to get back into form with their offense. They were looking really good prior to that Michigan game. I think that they bounce back here. So my total 153.5, wrote up the over, and here at 25, that's a maximum delay. I set my line at 25.5, so one delay 25, and looking at the over. 306-595, 306-596. Texas Southern plays us to Texas State. Texas State, a 5 to 6 point road favorite. Total on this game between 140 to 141.5. Set Texas State as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Texas Southern. Texas Southern brings back so much of their rebounding from a season ago that I think that's going to allow them to remain in this game. For Texas State, they've been playing a little bit more up-tempo this year than in past years. You've had Colton Benson, the transfer from Army, be out for them, but they've had Caden Gums really step up in the backcourt. 3.5 assists, 16.5 points per game for a Texas State unit that as a whole, they're shooting 37% from the outside. You've been able to have Tyrell Morgan give you 12.5 points, 6 boards per game. I know that he missed a few games, but should be all good to go here. And then in the backcourt, Drew Dryden has been able to log 9.5 points per game. Last year was shooting darn near 40% from 3. He and Dylan Dawson have been nice pieces in the backcourt. Dawson not really getting it going from 3, but he's been a nice ancillary sort of, I guess you call it facilitator. 10.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists. So he's been able to do a little bit of everything for this team. And then you got down low a guy in Chandler Turner who's been able to give you 4.5 rebounds per game. But for Texas Southern, you don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to give you like monstrous numbers down low. your top rebounder has been Kenny Hunter with about 6.5 rebounds per game, but you just have so many guys that they get after it. You've got a guy in Alex Anderson who I like, 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, just a hard worker in general. I do expect quite a bit more down low out of a few of these other guys as well. Like right now, you're only getting about 3.5 rebounds per game out of 6'5" Kobe Granger. I think that he's going to be able to pick it up. And then Dwayne Posey has been a really nice asset for the team at 6'7", was over at Northwestern State a season ago. He's not really a guy that's going to take you outside and shoot from three, but he's able to give you 7 points, 4.5 boards, is able to guard multiple positions. So really like the overall outlook of this team. And Texas Southern, unlike in past years, they're now shooting it from three. They're shooting 35.5% from the outside. They've been much more clean with that regard. And I do think that in this game, Texas Southern, with their home court advantage, as they don't get a whole lot of true home games outside the conference, they're going to be fired up for this one against a Texas State team that is typically relatively slow and controlled. Typically, both of these teams are, but I did set my total at a 141.5. You've got a Texas State team that, I'm going to call it what it is, against D1 competition. They've given up 80-plus points in each of their last 4 games. And we've got a Texas State team that they themselves have really been able to ascend on offense, and they've been giving up quite a few points recently as well. So I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Texas Southern. 306, 597, 306, 598. Mercyhurst is going to be on the road going up against San Francisco. Most books do not have a number up on this game because Mercyhurst, well, they played yesterday against Sacramento State. So it is a good old back-to-back spot, and as a result, I did set San Francisco as a 25.5 point favorite. I'm willing to lay up to 25 here, 26 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Mercyhurst, and then made my total a 135.5, so 135 or less, and on the over, 136 or higher. I'm going to be liking the under for Mercyhurst. I did have to downgrade them a few points because they are going to be playing in this back-to-back, and right now I'm seeing an opener at FanDuel of a 28.5. I would be willing to take the points here. I do think that for this Mercyhurst unit, it is going to be a little bit of a daunting task, but we saw what they were able to do yesterday against Sacramento State. They got the job done outright, and I'm just not really feeling the Sacramento team too much, especially down low. And that's where you want to hurt this Mercyhurst team, because for Mercyhurst, they don't necessarily have a ton of size, but when it comes to San Francisco, they lose their top rebounder from last season in Jonathan Mogbo. He was the only guy that gave them north of 4 rebounds per game. Backcourt is still very rock solid. Malik Thomas, 15.5 points, 3 assists. You've got a nice 3-point shooter in Marcus Williams, who's shooting 47% from the outside, 4 boards, 4 assists, 12 points per game, and Tyrone Riley has really been able to surge as a 6'6" freshman that's shooting north of 40% from the outside, 13 points per game. But Carlton Lindgard, the true 7-footer, needs to give you a little bit more than 4 rebounds per game. Riley is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.3 rebounds per game, and that means that Mikolas Ivanauskas, who's giving you about 5 boards per contest at 6'8" as a freshman, should be able to step up for Mercyhurst and not get completely blown out in this game. Jeff Planutis has been able to give you 13 points with a little bit of versatility, and Aiden Reichart has shown some versatility at 6'4", 11.5 points, shooting 40% from 3-point range. So he's been able to do a rock solid job for a Mercyhurst team that they're just doing the little things. Last year at the D2 ranks, they weren't necessarily a winning team, but they played really good defense. They played a lot of these games tight. Right now for Mercyhurst, only shooting about 30% from 3, but entered into ESA shooting 76% at the free throw line, 10 turnovers per contest. The back-to-back is tough, but in playing against Sacramento State and then San Francisco, it's not like it's a whole bunch of travel or anything like that. Sacramento State also a little bit more of a low-tempo team, so I actually think that this bodes quite well for Mercyhurst. And with regards to what we're seeing right now on this line of 28.5 and a 135.5 total, I would be waiting to see what we get in terms of this total. 135 or less, I'm in on the over. 136 or higher, the under, so should see a little bit of movement there. But at the 28.5, we'll take those points with Mercyhurst, and then we wrap things up with 306, 599, 306, 600. It is Stony Brook. They play us to Norfolk State. Norfolk State, a road favorite of 6 points. Total on this game is 140 to 140.5. Semi-line at 2.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stony Brook, and I'll write this one up as well. Let's hope to get back online with these. But with that said, this is a Stony Brook team that has been having a rough time with their offense. They're shooting well below 30% from 3-point range, while Norfolk State has been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Do think that should be reversing course a little bit. I like what CJ Luster has brought to this offense. 47% 3-point shooting, 13 points per game. Ben White, who comes on over from William and Mary last season, just couldn't get out there on the floor for Toledo. He's been able to supply the team with 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, while Andre Sadi also gives you about 5 rebounds per game. It's a nice rebound by committee sort of team going up against a Norfolk State team that's one of the biggest things for them. They're allowing opponents to rebound north of 38.5% of their misses, bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So even though they've been nice with their offense, shooting 36% for 3, 80.5% 50% at the free throw line. Brian Moore Jr., he's giving you more, 21.5 points per contest. Christian Ings, a career right around about 40% three-point shooter, 14 points per contest, and the 58% three-point shooting should be cooling down a little bit, but that's a bit of a concern that you got for a Norfolk State team that's starting to play a little bit more up-tempo. I would like to see a little bit more from Tyrell Bladen. He's giving you 4 rebounds per game, and then you've got Jelani Darden back. He was the top rebounder a season ago with 5 rebounds per game, up to about 5.3 boards per contest this season, but for Norfolk State, defense has been in a little bit of free fall for them. Stony Brook, they themselves have been having a little bit of a tough time against C1 competition, 77 plus points surrendered in each of their last 4 games, but I do think that for Norfolk State, we see them hit a little bit of a cooler with their offense. You've got a Norfolk State team, though, that is starting to be able to crank it up tempo a bit more. I think that this game is going to be close enough for a late game felling. I do think that this total is just a little bit too low for the way that Norfolk State does play. So it is a case where I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stony Brook. I think that their backcourt, especially with the versatility of Joe Octave, top scorer, giving you 14 points, 5 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest, keeps them lively in this one. So wrote up the points, and I'm in on the over, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks as always to Tristan Freeman, who does great work over at Bustin Brackets, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is by Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like here on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So, I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.